Thank you for tuning in tonight. Welcome to our Globespan discussion program and happy Independence Day. We are joined tonight by the former President of Guyana, President Donald Ramotar, former Member of Parliament, James McAllister, and Chairman of a new and United Guyana, Mr. Timothy Jonas. We're very glad to have our panelists here tonight for a special edition of Globespan for Guyanese Independence Day. Thank you, panelists, for coming on tonight. So we'll start out with opening message on independence from each of our panelists. If I'll have Mr. Jonas first to start out with the Independence Day message.
Good evening, Rusat. I had to mute my microphone because by coincidence, as soon as we started, a set of fireworks started going on outside. I think it's just finished, so I'm glad about that. Happy Independence Day, Guyana. It's 55 years that we've been doing what we're doing, and I think that it's a good occasion in this forum for us to have some reflections, to think about what we've done and what we can do and what we can change, and if we like where we're going. The interesting thing that I find with us is that whatever our diverse views might be, the people on this panel are inevitably well-intentioned, good-hearted patriots, and I'm glad to share this panel with two of them. So, happy independence, and let us see if we're happy with where we are, and if we can have a discussion on where we'd like to be. You're muted, Rusat.
I'm not hearing you. I'm not hearing.
You're still muted.
Hello?
You're still muted, Rusat.
Apologies, but thank you, Mr. Jonas, for your Independence Day message. Now, the former President, President Ramotar, your message for Independence Day.
Well, I would like to greet all Guyanese everywhere today, here and in the diaspora. All the best for independence. For a very long time, our country had been, we have gone through a lot, ups and downs, but we're still here after 55 years. So I hope that the future will be brighter than the past.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And the former Member of Parliament, Mr. McAllister.
Well, I'd like to also say happy independence to all Guyanese everywhere. And it's significant that at 55, we can now stop and take stock as to where we are, where we can possibly go. We can probably look back at our missteps and to try to make an assessment as to if we didn't make those missteps, where we could have been as a people, as a nation. So happy Independence Day to all Guyanese everywhere.
Thank you, Mr. McAllister. So on a positive note for independence, I was wondering from each of our panelists, what are moments in Guyanese history over the past 55 years or even before then in the independence movement that you look to on Independence Day and you look to that moment and it fills you with pride to be a Guyanese? Mr. Jonas?
That's a wide question. I'll tell you one. I don't know that you can call it pride, but it's a moment that stood out in my mind. When Walter Rodney died, word had passed through the public service that people were not to attend his funeral. But I have a memory of being a small boy and being taken out to see the assembly that walked behind his coffin. Huge numbers of people, all of them braving adverse conditions and possible victimization. And it showed me the strength and the resilience of Guyanese and how they can be united if a cause is just. And I think that that is a memory I have that I was very small, but it's a memory that I have that I treasure, and I hope that that resilience continues to bear us out to greener pastures.
Thank you, Mr. Jonas. So I'll get back to those questions just now, but we have some messages from religious figures, faith leaders, pastors, priests, and imams that we were going to play for an invocation to tonight's Independence Day. So I'll have our producer, Devin, play some of those, and then we will get back to the questions.
Om Shri Ganeshaya Namah. Om Yang Brahma Vedanta Vido Vadanti Param Pradhanam Purusham Tatanye Vishworgatim Karanamishwaram Va Tasmai Namo Vigna Vinashanaya Kayena Vacha Manasindriyanva Buddhyatmana Va Prakritir Swabhava Karomi Yajñat Sakalang Parasmai Narayanaeti Samarpayami. Salutations to that all-merciful Lord, who is the remover of all obstacles, by whose very name success is guaranteed. We salute thee, O Ganesha, who art the storehouse of wisdom. Again and again our salutations to thee. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. My dear brothers and sisters, today is a very special day in the history of Guyana. 55 years ago on this date, Guyana got its independence from Great Britain. Ever since, as the years went by, we've seen the resilience, we've seen the fortitude of such a great nation. We've seen the many sons and daughters that Guyana has produced, many of them emigrating to other countries around the world and aiding in the development of those countries as well. We want to wish our beloved Guyana a happy 55th anniversary, and we pray that may the blessings of the Lord be continue to be bestowed on the citizens of this great land, of all races, so that together we can work in cooperation and in unity to foster harmony and peace in the soils of Guyana, and to achieve all the desired goals aimed at the development of this great country. I would like also to commend my godson, Rusat, who is soon to be a prominent attorney, for the great work that he is doing also. He's a brilliant young man with tremendous potentials, and he will definitely make invaluable contribution to society, not only in Guyana, in America, but around the world as well. So Rusat, blessings to you. Keep up the great work that you're doing. And once again, happy anniversary to the great nation of Guyana. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om.
So that was our message from Panachirmal Naran, and now we have a pastor, the apostle Mercelin. Thank you for joining us tonight. He's live, and he will give a message from the Christian faith.
Thank you very much. God bless you. I greet you in the wonderful name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And I declare a blessing on Guyana. Join with all to celebrate our anniversary. Just before I pray, just like to share a few thoughts. One is that, from a biblical perspective, where we got our independence in 1966, it was not just a political or a social issue. There were men who struggled to get our independence. But I want us to also see and understand that in the divine plan of God, it was his desire to carve us out as a nation. And we want to give God thanks for that achievement and the 55 years that he has kept us by his power through difficult times, nice times, and all the challenging times that confronted us. The second thing is the scripture tells us David, one of the greatest king that ever lived in the nation of Israel, ruled the nation There are many prophetic words about him in scripture. But he said in one of his psalms, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Apart from it being divinely inspired, David is also speaking from the perspective of a great king. He's giving advice, which is something I believe we can look at. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Against that background, I would like to pray a special blessing of declaration over our nation. And so, Father, we want to thank you for, first of all, carving us out amidst all challenges and difficulties as a nation. When you have given us nationhood, it was not something only that we struggled for from a political perspective, but also it was your love, it was your grace, it was your mercy that really extended to us. So we are a people of destiny, and we want to thank you for this. We want to thank you for bringing us to this point amidst all difficulties and challenges. And I pray that as of this day, as we celebrate our 55th anniversary, we're going to experience economic growth, expansion, and blessing on the people of the country. I pray for all our leaders like you have instructed us to do. We pray that we will all follow godly values and principles so that we can lead a peaceable life in the country. I pray for national security, that you will preserve us as a nation amidst challenges that even surrounds us. But we believe, Father, with all our hearts, that you are in total control of every aspect of our lives. And so today, we are proud to stand together as one people, as one nation, with one common destiny. And that our destiny is not only a political end or economic end of growth and expansion, but a people that are covered under the power of your Holy Spirit. And so today, I declare your blessing on all, and I declare your blessing over the nation. We thank you, and we pray for this in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you to Apostle Mercelin for that wonderful Independence Day message. We appreciate it. Now, Devin, I think we have the video from the
Hi
Imam.
everyone, greetings. My name is Imam Safraz Bakas, and I would like to take this moment and extend to each one of you, our Guyanese brothers and sisters, and our entire nation, Happy Independence Day. As we commemorate this day, let us remember our motto, one people, one nation, one destiny. One people despite of our diversity, and one nation despite of our differences, and one destiny, the destiny of progression, the destiny of building for the younger generation, the destiny of development in all sectors. This is what we should work for. And as we commemorate this great day, let us remember the struggles of those who have worked tediously and even in the process lost their lives in the process of achieving this independence. Let us remember them and their struggle, and in addition to this, make a commitment to yourself that you will constantly work for the development of our dear land of Guyana, the land of many waters. On behalf of myself and my community, once again, Happy Independence Day, and kindly join with me as we pray together. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. All praises are due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, Master of the Day of Judgment. Thee alone we worship and Thy aid we seek. Show us the straight path, the path of righteousness, and not the path of which Your wrath and anger is on. We ask of Thee, O God Almighty, to bless our dear land, Guyana. We ask of Thee to continuously protect it. O Allah, we ask of Thee from the depth of our hearts to bless all those who have worked tediously and sacrifices their time and their life for the accomplishment of independence. We remember our foreparents, and we remember continuously those who struggle in the face of all oppression and in the face of all hindrances that came our way. We ask of Thee to bless the elder within our country and the youngsters within our country, and continuously look upon us with Your eyes of mercy and Your eyes of grace, and continuously intervene in the lives of our people with Your divine intervention. We ask of Thee, O God Almighty, to accept our prayer as we pray for everyone who have played an important role in putting this program together. Thank you, and have a blessed day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So thank you to those religious leaders for sending in those messages for independence. We appreciate it. A Christian apostle, a Muslim imam, and a Hindu pandit that reflects Guyana's diversity. I had gotten ahead of myself by going to the discussion questions before playing those videos, but now back to the discussion questions. The question I asked Mr. Jonas before we played that was about what moments in history do you look back at in Guyana that makes you proud to be a Guyanese? So I'll ask the former President Ramotar, what moments do you look back on Independence Day that fill you with pride to be a Guyanese? Mr. President, you're on mute.
Mr. Ramotar, can you click the mic button on the bottom left? There you go. We still aren't able to hear you. No, we still cannot hear you.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Hello? Oh, okay. That mic and the thing maybe now. There have been several moments, I would say, in the long 55 years history of our country. But I believe, for me, the most important, the one that gave me most hope was October 1992. Because our country was born in a very difficult circumstances. We were the only country in the whole Commonwealth that got independence with a state of emergency in place, and we had political prisoners, including the chairman of the PPP, who was Vernon Nunes at the time, was in prison, and many others were in prison at Sibley Hall. So we were a peculiar country that was born with probably the exception of Rhodesia, but Rhodesia seized independence itself. But independence was granted to British Guyana with a state of emergency in place and political prisoners. And then subsequently after that, we had a long period of undemocratic government in our country. And therefore, October 1992, was a period for me of great hope that we had turned the corner and our country was going to join the nations of democratic states, and that we would have been able to advance. So I would say, although there were many hopes, as Timothy mentioned just now, the Rodney funeral that brought a lot of people, outraged a lot of people, and people resisted. There was a lot of resistance that gave hope. At times, the Arnold Rampersad trials and so forth, they were all times of hope. But for me, the most important was 1992.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, to Mr. McAllister, what moments do you look back at in Guyanese history on this Independence Day?
Well, just let me say firstly, I'm proud to be a Guyanese every day. I just like to get that out of the way. So there's no particular day that I sit back, whether it is October 1992 or Arnold Rampersad or whatever. Every single day, I am proud to be a Guyanese because I have hope and I have faith that we can get it better. But to come directly to your question, I can remember a tremendous sense of pride when the president of Guyana, Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham, attended the North-South Summit in Cancun in 1981. At that time, I had the thought that he was representing the Caribbean and South America. But I've since learned that Brazil was there, but he was there representing the region, one of 22 world leaders. And I looked at it and I said, imagine we are just a small country, and here's our president with enough force on the world stage to be there speaking as an equal to the 21 others. So that one was my pride, but the thing is that there are also other times when you might want to reflect and see and ask yourself what we could have done better. Donald mentioned October 1992, where we called ushering in of democracy. I remember that day myself. And I also remember the years that followed. And I remember the fear that traveled the land when death squads and hitmen and so on walked under with the full protection of the so-called democratic government. So the thing, what I want to settle here, because I see Donald moving in a particular direction of pointing fingers and trying to upstage and that kind of thing. I'm here to upstage the PNC and make it look bad and promote the PVP. The thing is this is Guyana, we're 55. What do you see we can become? When you reflect on the past, what do you think we could have done differently that can put us in a position where that could have put us in a position where our citizens, every single one of them, all of them, would have been in a good place. So yes, I remember Burnham in Cancun, but the thing is, every day I am proud to be a Guyanese.
Mr. Ramgopal, you're muted.
Well,
thank you, Mr. McAllister. Now, on the topic of looking back to the past, and there are moments in Guyana where that people would not be so proud of. Now, my question to the panelists would be: how should Guyanese balance looking back at the past and learning from mistakes that happen with harping on the past as so many people tend to do sometimes? How do you strike that balance between just harping, living back in the past, actually looking back at it for lessons for the future? I'll put that question first to Mr. Jonas.
Well, the ancient Romans invented the theory that history exists so that we can learn and do better going into the future. If you don't have access to history to learn from the lessons made, you will repeat your mistakes. So yes, we need to move forward, but you don't move forward rashly without considering your past and the peculiarities of Guyana's situation. I noticed that everyone paused when you asked for that moment which made you proud, which swelled you with inspiration, patriotism. And I like James' answer very much. Proud to be Guyanese every day, absolutely. I can't improve on that. But I rather suspect that we and Guyanese might find it much easier to point to instances when we were not happy. James talks about the Black Clothes Squad, and I agree with him. Of course, they had their predecessors from long ago, and there's a case of Ramson and Barker, where another well-known lawyer had to sue the Commissioner of Police for false arrest when he was watching a Walter Rodney speech in the public and was arrested for loitering. So it does cut two ways, but I agree with James. We have to discuss what we can learn and move forward from that. I really think that the first thing that we must learn and move forward is that our police institution needs to be absolutely independent and absolutely professional and absolutely self-sufficient. And as long as a politician can pick up the phone and give direction, then we will have that specter hanging over our heads of oppression and victimization and fear. And I think that it's important for steps to be taken moving forward, for there to be a police force that we have confidence in. And that involves two things. It involves, first of all, educating the people who are there, incentivizing them to go to UG to further their education, increasing their salaries exponentially, encouraging a racial mix within the police force so that there is no perception, whether it's real or imagined, of one-sidedness. But absolutely and without any compromise, separating the police at its highest level from political interference. This is in the Police Service Commission, this is in social areas, this is in political areas. If our police force was self-sufficient and independent and did its job professionally and had the confidence of the people, the very real fears that James talked about, which happened throughout Guyana's history, would disappear and people would feel safer and more confident. And I think that is an important step moving forward that needs to be dealt with.
Thank you, Mr. Jonas. Mr. President, now building off that, how do you think that one can find a balance between looking back at the past and relitigating the issues of the past, but also taking lessons to move forward? And I'd ask you in particular, given your decades of public service and your political career in Guyana, what do you look back at as accomplishments that you say as a legacy that you want that to be remembered? And what would you look back at and say that you would have done differently if you had the chance?
Before I answer your question, I can't allow what James said to pass, and accusing us of being linked with Death Squad and all of that. First of all, when he talks about the Death Squad was created during the PNC time. You had what they called the Bongo Squad, they used to call it at the time. And secondly, the PNC has always historically been linked to criminal elements in our society. And even when we had the very fact that you had criminals in Buxton for so long, they could not have been there without the political protection of the PNC, and where people were silenced, like the Chester family and many other families in there. And secondly, James need to probably tell us what Basil Williams and Felix meant when Basil Williams thanks Felix for turning the killings on the east bank of the Marara away from the PNC. And then Felix admitted that he turned it away from the PNC, but also went on to say, I can't keep covering it up anymore because things are being exposed. So I just want to clear that up. And then to talk, I agree that we can't move forward unless we look back. And we have to look back very truthfully and frankly at our past, because as I said, Guyana was born in a period of state of emergency in place and political prisoners that we had. That is a fact. That the PNC and UF coalition was in government because of the machination of the British and Americans who did not like the people's choice in government at the time. I believe in going forward, I believe one of the things that we must seriously do is look at our electoral system. Not what they're talking about now. What we're talking about now is more looking at our electoral management and to try to manage the elections better and what have you. But Guyana was the only country in the whole Commonwealth that had PR was imposed on Guyana. And it was imposed for two reasons. The first reason was to try to get rid of the PPP from government. And the second reason was to get weak government in this country. That was in order to keep Guyana in weak government, and so that the foreigners could have pulled the strings on what happened here. What they didn't anticipate was rigged election, because they wanted to balkanize our country. I just want to remind my colleagues that in Trinidad, Eric Williams opposed viciously PR because he said it will balkanize Trinidad. And it's the same thing that happened here. A lot of our racial problems that we have in our country is because we have a PR system that encourages organization according to different type of interests, and it doesn't encourage people to push more for national issues. And the only reason that we're not worse off than we are today is because of the PPP resisting ever to make appeals to race in order to promote their political fortunes. So I will say we have to look at our electoral system, and we have to look at institutions. Timothy alluded to it about the police force, but that's only one institution. You have to look at our courts. You have to look at setting up other institutions, strong, good ethnic relations institutions, like the racial commission that we want to build. But we have to depoliticize it so that people will have confidence, so that people can go and get justice from these places, and whenever they have problems, and don't necessarily politicize everything, some of which will not necessarily have anything to do with politics.
So on the topic, Mr. President, of the electoral system, from a PR system, do you think Guyana should consider having a type of first past the post system, or more of a constituent system like in the Westminster Parliament? Yes,
I think so. I think that, in fact, let me just say this, that we just witnessed a terrible massacre in Israel, Palestine, in the Gaza. And a lot of that has largely been because of the PR system in Israel, because the fact that Netanyahu could not form a government, and he was before the courts for corruption, he deliberately provoked the problems in Jerusalem and at the mosque in Jerusalem in order to elicit a reaction from the Palestinian for him to do precisely what he did in order to whip up Jewish nationalism for him to stay in power. And if you know that Italy changed their system because of the same fact that they had elections, 2 elections, 3 elections a year, Germany changed their system, many other countries changed their system. And I believe it is very important for us to look in that direction, to look at real electoral reforms and not just electoral management.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Mr. McAllister, on the topic of the electoral system that the former president was talking about just now, I've had programs with Mr. Jonas in the past where we talk about whether Guyana should have a type of first past the post constituent system, especially with third-party candidates, may be more helpful to them. Now, in your career, your time in Parliament came to an end in part because of party infighting that arguably if there was a constituent system, you would not have been able to be removed. Now, do you think that Guyana should have more of a constituent first past the post system where you have an elected representative for a district rather than the current partyless PR system? Mr. McAllister, you're on mute.
And why is everyone forgetting to unmute themselves? Now I'm doing the same thing. Yes, I'm saying that Guyana should have a system that is representative and allow the people's voice to speak. And how we are going to craft that system, it will require some kind of study and analysis. I'm not one to say at this point in time that first past the post is the best system. Donald champions first past the post, and he speaks of the PNC UF government. What Donald is forgetting to mention that in elections before, the PPP with less than 50% of the votes commanded over 60% of the seats, 70% of the seats. That is not allowing the voice of the people to speak. What is clear that there was a problem with the demarcation. Someone who was involved in setting up the constituency boundaries must have gerrymandered it, because you're not supposed to have a system whereby a political party can overwhelmingly dominate over and over and over again with less than 50% of the seats. And it is because of that and that apparent unfairness in the system that we arrived at force past the post, rather a PR. It is allowed people to speak. And so what we had then, and Donald's talking about political prisoners and so on and things like that, and state of emergency. What we had was a political party rejecting the voice of the people because they wanted to maintain a system that gave them an unfair advantage. And when we moved to a system to say, well, like a one man, one vote, and we will count you all based on your percentage in the population, they had a problem with that. I think that is wrong. Now that we've had all these years of PR, should we look back upon it to see the weaknesses, the strengths, and to see how we can improve of it? Certainly. But when PR was introduced and we abandoned first past the post, it was a necessary thing to address the issue at the time. So we have to be careful when we want to conveniently cite certain aspects of history and to give the impression that the PUP was robbed. It was a free and fair election that was held. The PUP lost based on the Constitution, and not only based on the Constitution, based on the fact that more persons voted for the opposition parties, and that's why the PUP was removed from government. Simple. Now, you asked Timothy and Donald another question, and that question is about
bringing balance to relitigating the past and learning lessons for the future.
When I look at the past and when I thought about this program, what we're talking about now about this force past the post and this PNC and PPP, it's not what I envisaged. I looked at it and asked myself where Guyana was in 1966. And I look at the measure of what was our GDP. Our GDP was somewhere around $350, somewhere thereabout. And after all these years, we are at just maybe 6,500. My numbers might be off, but the GDP per capita. But when we look at other countries, that in 1966 we're probably where we were. Singapore was at 566. Trinidad was at 790. And Singapore in 2019 was $65,000. That was their GDP. Trinidad is 17,000 plus. And so when I look at that, and I say, what were the possibilities for Guyana? Where did we go wrong? What we could have done differently to ensure we could have delivered a better quality of life for our people. I'm not talking here about the PNC and the PPP and who should have won the election and so on and that. Why didn't we have a system that would allow the political process to deliver the kind of benefits to our people, the quality of life that it should have, given the riches that we all accept that Guyana is blessed with? This is something that we should reflect on, and this is something that we should try to see, given our missteps, in the last 55 years, what could we do differently in the ensuing period to ensure that we can deliver the quality of life for the Guyanese people? Keith spoke about, Timothy spoke about, I have a friend by the name of Keith Jonas. Timothy spoke about the police. And when he mentioned that, I remembered reading one of Lee Kuan Yew's book, where he mentioned, it was mentioned about this government official, where the police went to arrest him as he was occupying the office next to the Prime Minister. This was, I want to see a system whereby police take action, not because the political director will tell them to do it, or the police taking action against former government ministers or former These were some of the things that allow us to go off track, in that our processes weren't as they should be. And that is what I agree with Timothy there. That's one of the things we should do, is to work towards ensuring we remove the political influence from all of the independent agencies. That is my initial comment.
Thank you, Mr. McAllister. Just to follow up, you're talking about like looking back at where Guyana was in 1966 and where it is now. Where would you then say are the points where Guyana, in your mind, what are the points where things should have gone differently, and like those were the decisive points where it could have gone in a different direction?
Truthfully, I don't think that I can sit here and put my thumb on a political instance. I know our process was thrown off track by the oil crisis. That would be in the 1970s, and when the prices of oil skyrocketed and the bottom fell out of the economy. Yes, but that happened. But how did we respond as a nation over the ensuing period? Did we have a national conversation where everyone was on board addressing the issue? Because it was obviously a national crisis. But in the midst of that national crisis, our divisions continued and even deepened. As one political party can see an opportunity, given what is happening, and so on. So it's not a problem. Let it fester, and that kind of thing. We need to. I think if we had seized the occasion to examine ourselves, have a national conversation, come up with a national strategy that all stakeholders can buy into, and then we work towards that, we could have been at a better place, and the quality of life for our citizens could have been much, much better.
Oh, thank you, Mr. McAllister. So we actually, I think this is a perfect time to show it in preparation for tonight's program. We were finding back some archival videos from where Guyana was at the point of independence in 1966. So since Mr. McAllister was bringing up just now where Guyana was then, this is probably the time to show it. So we'll play back. I think among them is video of the royal visit to Guyana in 1966, and also the independence ceremony on May 26, 1966. Yeah. I'm not sure, is it fine?
You can go ahead, Mr. Ramgopal.
Okay. I couldn't see which video was playing just now, so if someone, but I believe one of the videos from the 60s was playing, so the viewers will be able to look back at the archival footage. But now, a question that I'll have for the other panelists is, after the point of independence, whatever point you believe is where Guyana could have done things differently and developed better, a lot of Guyanese did leave and end up becoming what's now the Guyanese diaspora in the UK and Canada and the US. Now, recently, the government of Guyana has been doing some incentives to try to get the diaspora to engage back in Guyana. Did a recent virtual conference. To our panelists, what do you think? What do you think of the current government's attempts to bring the diaspora back to connect back with Guyana and invest in Guyana? And what advice would you have on that? And what are your thoughts on engaging back with the Guyanese diaspora? I'll ask President Ramotar on that question, and then Mr. Jonas.
Before I go there, I think I need to correct some things too, because it's very important for people to have a correct understanding of our history. Mr. McAllister mentioned about our GDP, and I agree with him. But what he didn't mention is that our GDP was $300 per capita in 1964, and it was $300 in 1992. So if it's now $6,000, you have to measure it from 1992 to now. And I think that gives you an idea of how important democracy is in order to help a country to actually move forward. Second thing I want to talk about briefly about the electoral system that Mac was talking about, that PPP had a minority of votes and the majority of seats in the parliament. We had 57% of the seats in the parliament. But let me just make it very clear that that is precisely exactly the same thing that the British government that imposed PR on British Guyana in 1964, they had the same situation. That is the immorality of the situation. In it. Secondly, Jamaica got independence in 1962, and the Jamaican Labour Party won the election in the very same way that the PPP won the elections in 1961. Therefore, the opposition to PR was and is right now is that it encourages. In fact, I just read a few days ago an article in the Trinidad Guardian from 1964 looking at British Guyana when they imposed PR on us, and they said, quoting the commission report of 1962 about the racial problem in Guyana, where they said that the racial problem was as a result of political propaganda, and by instituting PR, we are constitutionalizing our racial problem. And I agree with that type of position. So I want to just clear that it's not an abnormal situation. This is a situation that can happen when you have constituency elections. But the important thing is that the experience is that constituency elections tends to force political party to deal with national issues and and to organize on national basis and not necessarily on parties and little interest group all over the place. And and that's a danger that Guyana faces, and it's a very big danger because now we have found oil, we have big companies in the country, we have big companies that are interested in our politics, and it goes to our sovereignty because they can finance a political party and create a hung parliament and have elections and throughout the government whenever they like. And that goes to our sovereignty. And I think that those things need to be thought about. That Guyana needs to have strong government. Yeah?
Like how the coalition was thrown out. I spoke about that.
The coalition was thrown out. No, comrade, you're not ashamed to talk about that? The coalition was defeated and they held on to power for how long? And you still have the brass face to come and ask me about how the coalition was thrown out? It was thrown out in free and fair elections. But let me finish. Let me go to let me finish. I'll give you a chance. I haven't been disturbing you when you were speaking, you know.
That is true. Yeah. That's very true, Donald.
But the other aspect of you ask about, I tend to agree with what the other colleague said, that we need strong institutions. I mentioned that. I don't think that the police force should be used for partisan political interests. And I agree with Jonas that there needs to be a balance in the police force. There needs to have, the police force must reflect the composition of our country more and more. But we have to also build new institutions that we were trying to build, like when I spoke about, we should make a really strong Ethnics Relation Commission that people will have confidence in. And they shouldn't be, nobody would be able to accuse them of taking partisan interests like we're having now. So we need to have to build institutions and build the confidence of the people in those institutions that can take us forward. Now it is true that we have been left back far behind in the course of things from independence, and now many other countries that were at the same level of us or even below us have moved past us. And we should be moving faster than that. But that is also, as a result, it tells you how important political democracy is, that we have to respect democracy. We have to preserve it. And to my mind, it is indispensable towards creating the atmosphere for social and economic development within a society. That is what I will say at this point in time.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll give Mr. Jonas a chance to answer, just respond to some of the points that were made by former President Ramotar and Mr. McAllister.
It's easy to say that our institutions need to be stronger and more independent. We're all agreed on that. The difficulty is when you get down to the nuts and bolts of how to do it. You see, for that to be done, the people in power have to release that power. And the history of Guyana shows the people in power don't release the power. We have a culture politically of trying to centralize, hold on to, grasp power. And when you talk about the decline in the economy, it started almost from day one with nationalization. Nationalization was a trend. They say hindsight is 2020. We look back now and we realize it was a disaster. But the two aspects of nationalization which harmed us were that, first of all, it destroyed any confidence in foreign investment. So foreign investors left, did not come back. And the policies of the government of the day did nothing to encourage them to come back. And the second thing that happened is that the new political elite, with a determination to reverse the historical inequality and the historical injustices, put people into positions that did not have the management capability, did not have the skills, family and friends. And the nationalized industries went in one direction. And as Donald says, the same $350 that we saw in 1966, saw in 1992. although the rest of the world had had several 100% inflation in the interim. So we saw a destruction of the economy where we were one of the more developed countries in the Caribbean to where we were looking at Haiti and Haiti was looking at us. And I think that the second aspect that we have to consider in a destruction of an economy is, as Donna says, democracy. You see, we learned something in 2015. In 2015, after 20 odd years of PPP governance, enough Guyanese were reassured that they voted policy. And the reason they did that is that the clouds of the past had lifted away to an extent. If we had fair elections in this country from 1966, the people would feel empowered when they cast their vote. And they would happily say to Ramotar, "You are a good and patriotic man, but we are going to change to McAllister because we don't like some of the things you've done." And they'll be able to say that in the confidence that 5 years later they may be able to say to McAllister, "We don't like some of the things you've done. We'll change back to Ramotar." And if the people genuinely felt that they had that power, if they had that confidence, so that our leaders were truly answerable to them, then you wouldn't see the kind of disastrous economic plans and policies and the attempt to centralize power, which continues today, the harum-scarum projects and expenditure for white elephants and that kind of thing. The reason those projects are possible and are done to the detriment of the whole country is that in each turn, our leaders do not feel answerable to the people. One group for one reason, the other group for the other reason. And that centralization of power is never going to change because each side in their turn enjoys that power. So we have a problem because we all know what needs to be done. We all know we need fair institutions. We all know that if we don't have that, if we have political interference in every single aspect of our life, that we won't improve and we will see ourselves going down the same trajectory. But after we finish saying that, we have heard tonight both Donald and James say that the other side has ignored the will of the people. And maybe that should be our starting point, you see. Because neither of them speak for the people. Both of them speak for their people. And that's a reality of Guyana. And both of them will answer me to say, "Oh no, we're a coalition, we represent all the people, we embrace." But let's deal with the reality. If we can face that reality, perhaps that they can then have a conversation about how they can cooperate for fair governance, recognizing that each of them represents their people, but neither of them represents the people. Maybe that's the starting point. Maybe going forward, that's the kind of conversation we need.
Timothy, you said Donald and I should have a conversation. Donald and I had many conversations when we served in the parliament together. We spoke at length about issues of national unity and what can happen, how it can be done, and so on. I was convinced Donald was a genuine guy. So I was surprised when Donald became president with a minority in parliament that he did not forge to have some kind of unity government. Because that is really exposing the stripes, where you have and this brings us back to what the PPP was fighting for in 1964. To have a minority in parliament was still being government. So, but the Constitution did not allow it then. The Constitution allowed it in 2011, and so that happened. So, but I am open to having this conversation. In fact, I put a lot of effort with some of my colleagues, Sherrod Lowe, Aubrey Norton, in putting together a shared governance proposal. Donald would know that that we bugged the leadership of our party at the time when we went before the Constitutional Reform Commission and made a presentation that was totally different from the party's presentation. And we were saying that, look, what we need to have in Guyana is a government of national unity for a period, where we can do a number of things, where we could have strengthened institutions that you mentioned, Timothy, whereby we don't have a political party in government who feel as if they're giving up power if they allow the police to be independent. You have a coalition of all the parties in government, and then we work on a process to ensure that our institutions are independent, our institutions are strong, and we can also convey to the nation a sense of unity. And then after that period, we go back to our party running independently, trying to be in government. So I had a conversation, and I'm prepared to have it again, but I am no longer in the center of that stage. Donald Moore is there, and he should probably try to initiate something like that. But I want to go to something that Donald mentioned. Last time I was on with him,
Mr. McAllister, I don't mean to cut you, but it's just that we do have to take a commercial break shortly, and with what you said just now, I will have to give Mr. Ramotar, or Mr. President, a chance to respond to that.
That is true, but I need to respond to something Donald said before he comes on. So if you want to go to the break and come back and give me a chance to just wrap it up very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, if you could make the point quickly so I could give him a chance to respond to it and then go to the break.
He mentioned about balance in the police force. When Timothy mentioned about ensuring depoliticization, he spoke about balance. He injected this thing again, and the last time I was on with him, this is the same line he took. And he took the line that in government jobs, the government is allowed to enforce a certain balance. But when you come to the economy and the economic sector, government has no interest. That is something that is works on its own. I don't know if Donald was aware, but maybe it would be around 2005, 2004, somewhere there above. There was discussion between the PNC and the government about procurement and how procurement dollars are being spent in the country. And is there equitable balance? If the government is spending government revenue, procurement dollars is 60% of the turnover, or 80% of the turnover of the country. How is it you have one group of people enjoying 80 or 90% of that? We had a conversation, and in fact, we had an agreement initially. I was fortunate to be there representing the PNC along with Charitable. The first meeting, the PVP sent Kobe Frimpong and the guy from the Ministry of Finance, I can't remember his name, the fat Indian guy. He was you're muted, Donald.
I know who you're speaking about. He's still there. He served the PNC well too.
I am not accusing the man of anything.
Okay, good.
Just saying that he was in the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And after 2 sessions, Frimpong and Balgobin, Frimpong and Balgobin agreed with most of our proposals. And we have to get it finalized to come back for us to sign off, where we could have had equity in the system. When we turn up for the next meeting, there's no Frimpong nor Balgobin. Who other than Roger Luncheon was sitting there to say that the boys say that that thing can't work. So I'm just giving this example to show that there were efforts made towards having equity all over. But we can't have the situation with the PVP is enforcing equity in the police force and public service as if people have not worked for that. If a guy who spent 20 years or 25 years in service is not entitled to the level he has, the office he has, and the government has the right to come and move him aside and put somebody because of in the name of equity. But the government refuses to look at the imbalances in the economic sector when government is spending all its money in one area and not spending it in another. We can have, and we should have a conversation because it is necessary. It is necessary for confidence in the system. It is necessary for people to feel safe, to have equity, not only in the police force and the public service, but in the financial sector and in all other sectors that we can think about. So that is my response right now, and as we go to commercial break.
Okay, well, we are running a bit over time there, so I mean it is 8:10. Mr. Ramotar, would you Mr. President, would you prefer to respond now, or would you be okay if we take the commercial break and I'll give you 10 minutes to respond after?
Yeah, whatever is more convenient to you.
Okay, so if we could take a break now, and we'll be back with
Doubles for your troubles. Get your doubles monthly boxes from allfromOneSupplier.com. Treat yourself every month with an All From One Supplier Doubles for Your Troubles box. Select any one of these monthly boxes. We have 12 doubles plus 2 solos for only $36 a month, 12 doubles plus 3 bus-up shot, and 3 Dalpery for $50 a month, or 12 doubles plus 6 bus-up shot, or 12 doubles plus 6 Dalpery for $50 a month. Your choice, your treat. Select your box on allfromonesupplier.com. Doubles for your troubles monthly boxes and all of your West Indian items from allfromonesupplier.com. Log on today or call 718-551-3292.
Travelspan is pleased to announce Curry Duck Curry Punta Cana 2021. Yep, it's Travelspan Curry Duck Curry with an inclusive vacation 2-in-1 on August 12th to August 16th. Special performances by Terry Gadraj, Sexy Marissa, the Tassamen, and the DJs are all going to Punta Cana on August 12th to August 16th. It's fun, games, party, and curry duck curry at VIK All-Inclusive Resort. All you can eat and all you can drink. Travelspan has flights from JFK, Newark, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Orlando, and Houston directly to Punta Cana. It's Travelspan Curry Duck Curry and an all-inclusive vacation. It's 2-in-1 on August 12th to August 16th in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. All-inclusive packages include air, hotel, transfers, all meals and drinks from $9.99 persons. Travelspan Curry Duck Curry is sponsored by allfromonesupplier.com. Dave West Indian. Call Travelspan at 212-243-0865. That's Travelspan at 212-243-0865. Or book on travelspan.com.
Globespan 24/7 is serving the community for over 2 years. We hope that the programs have been of value to you as we continue to connect with the issues and politics that matter to you. Support Globespan 24/7 initiatives by logging on to globespan247.com. Click on Globespan 24/7 talk shows and make a contribution. Your contribution will help to build a better platform for the communities. On Globespan 24/7, you can also download the player for Roku TVs, Samsung TVs, and Android TV boxes. You could also download the Globespan 24/7 channel on your Android mobile phone. Support Globespan 24/7 and also support the companies that support Globespan, such as Travelspan and allfromonesupplier.com.
And we're back. Following the break, we have the former President Donald Ramotar will respond to what was said earlier by former Member of Parliament Mr. McAllister. So, Mr. President, if you take the time to respond now.
There are a couple of things. I think First of all, I want to talk about Mark was making the point that I was in government with a minority in parliament and I should have pushed for a unity government, and I did. But it's not so easy as they're trying to make it out. Look, in 2012, when before the budget was presented in the parliament, I had a meeting with the PNC, the leader of the opposition, David Granger, Harman, and many of them were there. We had a long talk. They're talking about what we could do in the budget. He asked me to increase the pension, and I said yes, I could do that. The next day in the parliament, Ashley Singh announced that based on the representation made by Mr. Granger, we were going to increase the pension for the people, and that went through. The next day we agreed that we will begin to reduce. We all agreed at a meeting that we will begin to reduce the subsidy for the electricity in Linden, because that's a very unconstitutional situation that exists. Linden people hardly pay anything for electricity and the rest of the country is paying. But we recognize that it has been there for a number of years, and we decided that we will do it gradually. And the PNC agreed with us that will be done. And the next day, Prime Minister Sam Hinds prepared a speech in the parliament about what we agreed on. He showed the speech to Granger, the then opposition leader, and Rupert Ryan, who was his deputy then. And they looked at it and they made little corrections in it and give it back to. We have that paper in our hands. And give it back. And then when Sam announced it, and just like the biblical Peter, before the cock crowed twice, thou shalt deny me thrice, the PNC denied after a little while, and that has caused the riots in Linden. So it's not so easy. It's not so easy when you don't, when you have the other side not adhering to this agreement that has already been made. Now let me talk about the other issue about the procurement issue that Mark raised. And the PPP did try to help and develop other contractors in our country. Courtney Ben is an instance for one. He's one, and there are many others that they try to implement. But the bidding system was according to law, and there was this fellow there who the clue who was there. You can ask him. You should probably get him on your program and to find out if the PPP ever instruct him not to go along with the thing that they had to process. And that is how some of those things happen. I want to also say to make another issue here because Timothy mentioned about nationalization was the cause of some of the problems within the country. I am not so sure that nationalization by itself was the cause of the problem. I believe more it was the lack of democracy within the society, and where these businesses were not allowed to run as they were as a business entity and to be successful. But we had successful. There's examples of successful nationalization in the world. I mean, look at China today. The second most powerful economy in the world, and the public sector is still the biggest sector in the Chinese economy. Whatever else you want to say about it, it's still the biggest sector. I agree that maybe we went too far because we crowded out the private sector and we didn't allow the private sector to play its role at that time. Maybe it was a learning curve for us. But to blame nationalization for all the problems, I don't necessarily agree with it. I think we need to have, that's why the PPP was always speaking about a mixed economy, state, private, cooperative sector, to work to give space for everyone to be able to make a contribution. But I don't think by itself the public enterprise is a drag on society. There are cases of that, yes. But right in our own country, we have experience of that. The GPL in the 1960s, when it was owned privately, it was one of the worst managed business in the country. When it was taken over by the PPP, it became one of the best, and that is how we started to do rural electrification. And when it went back, it went again. It had a problem when it's public ownership, and they put it in private ownership hand, and the private ownership give it back to the government for $1. So I don't think there's one experience that you can just cast one experience and and say, but this is the problem. I think that we have to examine these things in an individual way and get down to the cause of it. But to rule out completely one form of ownership, I don't think it's the right thing to do. And then Timothy also talk about when you have power, you don't want to hold power and lose power and what have you. I don't know anybody who wants to lose power, but the question is how you use it if you're misusing it. And I think he's wrong to accuse the PPP of misusing power, because he is a lawyer. And I want him to say if he thinks that the PPP has been running the courts and directing the courts of what decisions to take. And I wouldn't want to argue, because I think he will make some arguments about the police, although I don't think that the PPP is directing the police that the way they're saying that the PPP is directing the police. That is not so. The charges that are going ahead right now on some of these people, I mean, I think they're real issues. Look, just today's headline in the papers, 30 or 40 million was spent on a Christmas party by GWI. All of these things shouldn't be investigated and shouldn't be see if there's corruption in these things and so forth. So the moment the government, I know for a fact that when the PNC was in office, there was witch hunt. SOCO was used to witch hunt PPP former ministers and officials of the government. And a lot of people suffered unnecessarily because of that. But I do not see at this time the charges that are taking place in our society as witch hunt. I think that there are real cases that needs to be answered in that regard. So to just cast and throw, by the way, gaff or slogans out like that and accuse people, I think it's quite wrong to do some of these things. So that's what I would like to respond to my two colleagues.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. President. So I just have a quick question for President Ramotar. It's a light question, and then after that I'll ask each of our guests for our closing remark of sorts. So, Mr. President, tonight all the guests talked about the history of Guyana, and obviously there can be different perspectives on the history, but it's an important thing going forward for young Guyanese and those who may not be in Guyana, but maybe Guyanese Americans, Guyanese Canadians, Guyanese Britons to learn about the history of the country. It's very important. Now, in some countries, like for example the U.S., you have a system where you have the presidential library system, where after the fact each president has their libraries and archives where the information is available to the public to learn back about the presidency. Would you like to see a situation in Guyana one day where you have a Donald Ramotar presidential library and young Guyanese will eventually use that to look back at your career and learn about their country's history?
I think it's a necessary thing. I mean, of course, I had a short period in the presidency, 3.5 years, but not very long in the presidency. And I had, maybe it's a good study of harassment of a government, because every single project that we tried, I mean, imagine that the opposition voted against the Amila Falls project. They voted against the anti-money laundering bill that was not really pushed by the PPP, but that was a bill from the international community. They voted against every single thing. They voted against the Marriott Hotel, everything they voted against. So I think it could be a good study of how a government was harassed in the 3.5 years that I was there. But yes, I think it's a good thing, but these things are very expensive things. You want to transplant something from the United States that is good to here, but it also costs money. Maybe later on we will be able to afford it, and maybe we'll be able to do these things. But there's not every single thing I think we can just transfer from a developed country that has huge resources to countries that are struggling with some of the basic necessities of life. So I'm not opposed to it, but I think it's something that we have to judge whether we could afford it and so forth.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I'll just note something that as a Guyanese, as a child of immigrants from Guyana to the U.S., and I studied in England as well. Growing up, you never saw Guyana in our lessons and in the U.S. or in the U.K. until one day when I was in law school and we were studying constitutional law. The lesson was on the was on your prorogation of the parliament and the crises that you faced while in office, and that was the first time that ever, as a person whose parents are from Guyana, I was looking out for when is Guyana in our lessons. That was the first time we ever had a lesson and dealing with Guyana. It was about you and the prorogation.
I hope you defended the prorogation as being something that was constitutional. It was constitutional, and you know what is hypocritical about the whole thing? Some of the pressure that came down on me from the international community. Canada, under Harper, as Prime Minister, he prorogued his parliament for 4 times. 4 times he prorogued his parliament, but that was not an issue. But I prorogued the parliament for 1 time, and that became an issue. And I hope you were able to defend it properly.
Yes, Ed, I think that it's something interesting to look back on. That at the time, the professors I had were noting that it's such a rare thing for a leader to prorogue the parliament. But after that discussion was had, both Justin Trudeau and Boris Johnson in their countries have prorogued their parliaments controversially. So it really, I don't think it should be an issue where the international community
you had a poor professor. Well. 4 times Harper prorogued his parliament in Canada.
It's not the same thing, Donald, but that's
the same thing.
It's not the same thing. That is a discussion for another time.
Okay, whenever you're ready, I'm happy to have that discussion too.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But on that note, I will ask each of the panelists for a closing statement, and it also within the closing statement, I'd ask. We look back tonight at the history of Guyana over the past 55 years, and especially we played the archival footage of the May 1966 independence ceremony. And in that ceremony, I think one of the poignant things was not just the image of the Union Jack coming down and the Guyanese flag going up, but also the image of, despite what else may have happened over the course of Guyanese history, at least at that moment, there was the hug between Charitable and Forbes Burnham. And I wonder what the panelists feel looking back at the history of Guyana, and what closing remarks you have and advice for the young people of Guyana in the future as they look for a better future for the country and hopefully a spirit of national unity. So I'll ask former President Ramotar first that question.
Well, as I said in my opening remarks, our history was not always an easy one. We had our ups and downs, and we had our good periods and bad periods. But I think that gradually for instance, we had a big fight last year in order to try to defend democracy. And I think that's a good thing, that we were able to defend democracy and the will of the people eventually prevailed. And I think it is so important, not only because the PPP won the elections, but largely because I strongly believe that there can be no social and economic progress without political democracy. And therefore, I believe that it's a system that we must value, we must cherish, we must enrich, and we must advance. And that is why I was saying that one of the ways that we can advance it is really having a true look at our electoral system, to have a real discussion on it, to see, because I personally believe that the system that we have, which was imposed on us in 1964, is an impediment for us to build strong national unity in our country, and where political parties and political forces will be looking more at national issues and an issue that can go ahead with us. And I quickly want to, the thing that also struck me when you were speaking just now is the point that I've worried me for a while, when you talk about a lot of young people don't know our history. I think that at least in our educational system, there needs to be at least, because right now our students only study Caribbean history. And I don't know how much of that Caribbean history that they study talks about Guyana. I still think that we should have Caribbean history being studied by our students, but I believe Guyana, our students should have a special class to study Guyanese history, because I don't know how else we can deal with that issue. We can have a class we can put together some of our best historians to come up with a textbook so that our children could study Guyanese history, and they can have in Guyana an examination on Guyanese history to be able to understand, because I believe a lot of people always say that we shouldn't look back and so forth, but I believe unless we look back and understand very much and learn from our past, that we will not be able to advance our we would not be able to advance our country in the way that we want to advance. We might make one step forward, but then generally we sometimes make 2 steps back. So I think it's important for us to have that great understanding of our history.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, Mr. Jonas, your closing remarks.
I was startled to hear Donald voice support for nationalization and carry us all the way to China for an example of a successful instance where it took place.
No, I pointed out to you
mind,
that the GPL was a successful one under the PPP government.
No, you weren't interrupted.
Respectfully.
No, I'm just correcting. I'm not interrupting. I'm correcting. Goodly gentleman.
So, Mr. Ramgopal, I think about sugar, I think about bauxite, I think about GNCB, I think about can refrigerators, I think about Chronicle, and then he mentions GPL. And there isn't a Guyanese 40 years old or thereabouts who doesn't remember GEC in the days of the 1970s going into 1980s, when blackout was not a 1 hour or 2 hour thing, but was a 3-day or 4-day thing, all courtesy of government ownership and government management. And here we are in 2021, and I got backup systems for the expected inevitable blackout in 2021, courtesy government ownership and government management. We're right. It's time for new ideas. It's time to recognize past failings. And I am sorry to say that I'm not seeing from our leaders that we are managing to do either one. We talk about fair systems and we talk about electoral reform, but our experience has taught us that when these folk go in to have these discussions, they don't do it with Guyana's interest at heart. They do it with the motive of perpetuating and consolidating any power that they could get, which is why we have all the problems with the segregation of the proportional representation system, which is why we have issues with doubts about GCOM, which is why we have need for foreign scrutiny of our elections, because consideration of country for these people is secondary to consideration of party loyalty, and everything we do is okay and everything those people do is bad. Fortunately, you talk about the young people. And fortunately, we are moving away from that. And enough people are recognizing that inherent hostility and finger pointing isn't taking us anywhere. But I don't think that we can rely on our existing institutions to lead us out of the darkness. To get out of the wilderness, there needs to be a new approach.
Well, okay. Thank you, Mr. Jonas, for that closing remark. And then we have Mr. McAllister. But if you could give your closing remarks. We are a bit over time, so it would be appreciated if it could be as quick as possible, because we are over time. But Mr. McAllister, your closing remarks, please.
Okay, thank you. First, let me thank Timothy and Donald for a good program. As much as we didn't agree on everything, I think we managed to share ideas that will be some food for thought going forward. We looked at the last 55 years since independence. I think now we need to look to the next 45 years. And there needs to be a national conversation and an agreement as to where we want to be. And the kind of benefits and quality of life we can deliver for our people. We must agree and we must understand. Donald was emphasizing for the entire night the issue of democracy and the people's confidence in the electoral process. We need to have an electoral process where there's confidence. You can't have, for instance, a process where there's a list where 50% of the population has confidence in it and another 50% doesn't have confidence in it. We need to have a system where when the people go and they cast their vote, the vote has an impact and they are represented, not where the votes are in any way diluted. To achieve these things, I would say to young people in Guyana to reject the politics of division. Reject it outright. And try to look forward toward forging a sense of national unity. That is the only way you are going to achieve the quality of life that is possible in our country. And I think this can start with us pushing with you. I'm speaking because I no longer consider myself young people. With the young people in Guyana pushing for an interim period of a government of national unity, where we can fix the things that are wrong with our processes, fix the things that are wrong with our systems, in a bipartisan way. And once that happens, then we can go back to functioning in the competitive political arena, but we'll be confident that our processes and checks or balances will protect us. So that is what I would like to leave. I can't give all I have some ideas as what I'd like to see for Guyana, but there has to be a conversation and there has to be a general agreement, because I believe we can, in Guyana, can have the quality of life comparable with anyone, anywhere on earth. We have the resources for it, and we just have to ensure we put the processes in place. And that is by ensuring there is a political system that rejects the politics of division.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McAllister. Thank you to all our panelists for that discussion on 55 years of Guyanese independence. We really appreciate the panel. Our next part of the program is we are still to hear from we'd like to focus also on New York politics. We have Japneet Singh is a candidate running in the Richmond Hill community in Queens, where Guyanese Americans, a large amount of them, do live. So we will have him on. He's been waiting for a while because this panel discussion has gone longer than expected. So we're going to have him on next, and then we also have a message from Pandit Bobby to talk about his charitable work in Guyana, and then we will be done with tonight's program. But this is the end of the Independence Day panel discussion. We really appreciate all our panelists for joining tonight. Mr. McAllister, former Member of Parliament, Mr. Donald Ramotar, the former President of the country, and Mr. Timothy Jonas, Chairman of New and United Guyana. We really appreciate your discussion. Wish you all a happy Guyanese Independence Day.
Thank you.
Is Japneet Singh still there?
Don't worry about it. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So could you tell us what you're running for in the Queens community?
Yeah, so my name is Japneet Singh, and I'm out here running for New York City Council in the Council District 28, which represents South Richmond Hill, South Ozone Park, South Jamaica, and Rochdale Village, as one of the biggest West Indian Indo-Caribbean populations, as well as the biggest South Asian populations as well.
Yeah, so the area you're running in is one of the large Guyanese American communities. Today is Guyanese Independence Day. Would you like to share a message to the Guyanese American community about 100%. Guyanese Independence Day?
100%. I mean, first and foremost, I want to thank you for the amazing work that you're doing, putting the Guyanese people as well as just the youth on the map. I think it's very important with the type of work you're doing to represent the Indo-Caribbeans as well as the youth. So thank you for everything you're doing. To my Guyanese brothers and sisters, We're with you all the way. This campaign is actually to unite every community that lives in this district. My chief of staff is Guyanese, Shivani. So we've been getting a lot of support from the Guyanese as well as the Indo-Caribbean communities that live here in South Richmond Hill, as well as South Ocean Park and South Jamaica. And we want to make sure we create an atmosphere, we create a community where we embrace each other, we embrace each other's cultures. Because at the end of the day, we all came from one place, right? But we diverted into different corners of the world, but at the same time, we're here now. South Richmond Hill, South Ocean Park, South Jamaica, that's our home. It's been our home. We built this community, and now it's time to represent this community.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the end part so well, but thank you, Mr. Singh. Now, I know that your campaign focuses. There's been a lot on the aspect of representation, because a lot of communities, the Indian American community, the West Indian American community, hasn't felt that we've achieved the level of representation that we may deserve in Queen's elected office, based on how many of us there are living in New York City, living in Queens, and versus how many are actually in these elected positions. So what is your campaign platform on the issues of representation and on other issues affecting the community?
Yeah, no, representation is huge for us living here in South Richmond Hill, especially because we have the largest Indo-Caribbean as well as the South Asian populations, and the fact that we do not have anybody that looks like us with the last name Singh or any one of our ethnic names, that goes to show how much work we need to still get done as a community. We have the mayor says Happy Diwali, but what does Diwali mean? What does Diwali represent? What does the culture around it mean? And until we don't have someone that looks like us, that knows the culture, knows the history, knows the religion, the significance of it, and that's in City Hall, that is leading the program for Diwali or other programs that we celebrate as a community, we can take pictures with all these politicians as much as we want, but that's not going to get resources. It's not going to get funding into our community. We need someone that looks like us, that's gone through that's gone through the experiences we have in this community, and that can advocate for our communities for a better future. Because at the end of the day, if you're living in this community, chance of your kids living in this community and going to school here is very high. And we want to make sure we create a better future for them, and that way, when they grow up, they see someone that looks like them, and then they also want to run for office.
I'm sorry, I don't think my connection is the greatest right now. I'm not getting the flow of the conversation the best, but my next question to you is, on the election, could you tell our viewers what day is the election, about how to vote, and other ways maybe that they could, if they're interested, be affiliated with your campaign, support your campaign? Where's your campaign office located in the neighborhood?
Can you hear me right now? Is it good right now?
So I could hear you right now, but like sometimes I can't hear exactly when you're finishing. So I'm sorry if the cut and the flow is
not the greatest. It's all good. It's all good. So our campaign office is right here on 120th Street and 94th Avenue, right here in Richmond Hill, and we are open from 10 a.m. until 10 p.m. essentially most days. Our official business hours from 10 a.m. Until 8 p.m. So, we're here. There's always someone in the office, but most of the time we're out in the field talking to voters, talking to the people that live in this community, going to local businesses, and just making sure the people know that this is a very important election. This year is one of the most important elections of our lifetimes, because we have a new mayor we can select. We have a new controller we're going to have new borough presidents. We're going to have about 37 new council members. That's guaranteed, as well as all the incumbents that are running against newcomers like myself. So this is a very big election year for our entire city. And election day, the primary day, is June 22nd. So for everybody that usually doesn't vote for primaries, it's just as important to vote in the primaries as it is in the general, because in New York, usually it's always leaning Democrat, meaning whoever wins in June is likely to win in November as well, with the exception of in 2 or 3 districts in the city. But most likely, whoever wins in June will win the general election in November, which is why you have so many people running in June, because it's such an important, it's whoever wins that election is going to win. So June 22nd is a primary day, and then you have early voting from June 12th until the 20th, right? And then, since COVID is still, it's still a big scare in our community, you can also request an absentee ballot that can come, once you fill it out, you submit it, a ballot can come straight to your house. So those are 3 options that you have.
So, as you mentioned just now, COVID was very big in the Richmond Hill community. A lot of Guyanese Americans were affected by it. What's interesting about your race is that you are running a strong campaign against an incumbent figure. You're running against Adrienne Adams. She is the incumbent, I believe. Reuben Wills, who once held the office, but I had to leave the office due to his scandal, his jail incident. He's also running now. How do you view the issue of running against the incumbents? And also, do you feel that maybe because the incumbents left behind the community for so long, like I don't know if in your campaign you're addressing the issue of how was the community dealt with while it was dealing with COVID? Did the sitting city council woman do enough in your mind or in the minds of the voters? How are you taking the issue of running against an incumbent and a former incumbent in that seat?
I'm not scared at all. I think we need to stand up as a community. I think we need to take ownership. We built this community. 2/3 of the district feels left out. I'll say that any day, anywhere, to anybody, because that's how we feel. South Richmond Hill, South Bowling Park has not gotten its fair share. It's in the numbers. Everything's public record. We can see where the money's going. At the same time, there's a lot of need there's a lot of help that's needed all across the district. This district gets resources last, vaccinations last, school funding last. Everything that you can think of A to Z is last. Why is that? Because we do not have strong representation in this community. It's one of the most diverse communities. However, we do not have representation that actually represents the communities that live here. There has never been anybody that's won across the other side of the Van Wyck, which is this community. Why is that? And that's why I'm much younger than everybody else running in this race. I'm 26 years old. I'm pretty sure in the 50s or 60s. So they've been leaders in this community. They have a track record. They've shown, and lack thereof, they've shown what they haven't done for our communities. So it's time we take that ownership, we take that mantle. And if they can't do it for us, but they come to our mandirs, they come to our gurdwaras, they come to our houses, they come for votes, they come for money. But where are they when we need them? That's the question I want everybody to ask themselves. Because it's funny. I think you were talking about how they're going to change the sign to Little Guyana, right? But at the same time, look at the timing of it. I want everybody to understand the timing of when it's being done, right? A month before primary. This could have been, if I'm not mistaken, in 2017, there's a Guyanese person that ran. He could have, this could have been done, right? If that could have been a platform item from the first thing that the current elected official could have done as soon as they got into office, right? But why are they doing it now? All of a sudden, when they were nowhere to be found in the last 4 years, and now when they know there's a primary and there's a challenger from this side of the Van Wyck, they want to do this at this particular time. So I want everybody to understand and register that in their minds, because they did the same thing in my community. They named 101 Punjab Way, and they did this at the end of last year. Why is that? Why did it take 4 years to even get to this point when, West Indians, the Punjabi community has been here for so long? This is something that we've been advocating for years, decades, and it's being done now when they know that they need to lower the South Asians as well as the Indo-Caribbeans to get the votes. So that's something that we need to stop falling into that trap and getting fed scraps. Someone messaged me earlier today about it, and I think some people understand it, but then there's also some people that don't, and I think we need to be full aware of what they're doing. This is a system, and we need to beat the system together.
Yeah, Adrienne Adams. I think objectively it's a good thing that Guyanese are getting some recognition in the renaming of Little Guyana. But Adrienne Adams got the position in 2017, and you're right to note that the renaming is being done May 29th, 2021, ahead of a June 22nd, 2021 re-election battle. So it is important to keep that in mind as a voter. Now, you talked about being from the other side of the Van Wyck, right? Now, if you look back at races over time for city council, state assembly, etc., there have been candidates of Indian descent that run in the past, but and they may get some engagement during the campaign, but unfortunately they don't end up winning, in part because they don't get the strong turnout on the election day, or in this case now we have more early voting, so in the days before the election. How would you deal with that? How do you think you're doing with voter engagement to make sure that it's not just a voter seeing your sign on Liberty Avenue and saying he sounds like a good candidate, but actually showing up on the election day or the early voting days?
Honestly speaking, I think people are mobilized. I think in the last year, what it's shown us is how important good leadership is. I think people are tired of the system. From just talking one-on-one with people, I've seen the desperation in their eyes, how much they want change, how much they feel left out. And I've seen it personally, right? I'm talking to people every single day, almost like 1,000 people every other day. So, in 2 days, we talk to about 1,000, maybe more people. So we've seen it firsthand how important it is to have someone that looks like you, that feels your pain in there. So that way, when it's time for decision-making process, they advocate for the community, right? I'm a son of this community. I've been here since I was 8 years old. So I've been here. I grew up here. I live here. I went to PS 100, MS 226, John Adams High School. Went to Queens College, only 15 minutes away from this community. So I took the Vanvic every single day. So I've seen it firsthand how much leadership in this community, has let this community down. And it's up to us, the youth, to take ownership of that and take on the mantle and make sure that we can bring better representation here. So going back to your question, we're gonna provide transportation to people. We're gonna provide any if they don't know where they are registered to vote. We're gonna make sure they know their voting site. So we're gonna do everything possible. Like this, if you go down the block now, people know when primary day is. Like I don't know why. Like what the I just leave everything on God. We're working hard as much as we can, but at the same time, people are engaged. They know there's a race on June 22nd, and on top of that, it's a mayoral race. So the turnout is going to be higher as is, because people are going to come out to vote for the mayor. They're going to have to vote for the council person as well, because it's going to be on the ballot. So they're going to see the names, and I'm hoping the difference is last name Singh. They've seen it around. They've heard from us. We've been going door to door. This is a truly grassroots effort, and that'll be the difference.
I have one more question for you, and then we'll close up because it's getting to 8:51 now. But on the issue of youth, do you think that something that could make a difference in your race is youth engagement? Because something that I've noticed, I don't know if you have the same feelings, is that there is a different level of engagement among the youth that's grown up in the past few years in New York. I think that there's a higher level of activism or political engagement. I think we could see in the past few years a lot of youth, even from the community, brown, Guyanese American, Indian American youth, getting involved in things like protests or political activism that maybe you wouldn't have seen 10 or 15 years ago, but you're seeing now. Do you think that the level of youth engagement in politics, including local races, it could make a difference in your race?
100%. Majority of my team is youth activists. And thing is, like I always tell someone, before they vote for me, look at the work I've done. Look at things we've been a part of, the service we've been a part of. Because I'm not here as a politician. I'm not a politician, right? I'm a public servant. I've been doing this since I was 19 years old. So I like building relationships. I build relationships because if people believe in you, people believe in the vision that you have for the community, chances of them believing in you long term is much, much higher, and they'll actually invest in you. And that's what's happening. People are seeing it. People are seeing like, wow, like even though you're young, you're still community first. The things we've done without government assistance, just out of our own, just a youth group that we have. It speaks by itself. We've given out about 3,000 to 4,000 meals just in the first 2 months of COVID. This is like when it was at its whole time high. I'm talking about between March and May of last year. So we were out giving out meals to essential workers, those in need, first responders, everybody. And that's something that a youth group did, and that's what the youth can bring if they're mobilized. But now think about government assistance when you add that to the mix. You can take government assistance and make these programs so much bigger. I know there's a community fridge right here on Liberty Avenue. That's a youth-led effort. Community cleanups, youth-led efforts. There's so many things that the youth are responsible for. It's time we recognize them.
Yeah, so now, just to wrap things up, for our viewers, Japneet Singh, candidate for City Council in the Richmond Hill and South Ozone Park area. The Democrat primary election is June 22nd. Mr. Singh, what would your closing remarks and message be to the Guyanese American community ahead of your election, or ahead of the upcoming election?
First and foremost, I want to give you a shout out, brother. I know you're extremely young yourself. What you're doing is phenomenal. We need platforms like this led by young men and women, because that's the future. We don't have a ultra motive. We want to just make sure we represent the community and represent every community. So I give you a lot of praises for doing what you're doing, bringing people together. And my message would be, listen, you want different results, make a different choice. We've seen the system, we've seen what's done for us, and it speaks for itself. Nothing has been done for this community, and now we have a chance to change that. We have a chance to elect someone that's a son of this community, that grew up in this community, and that has his own family living here, that hopes to raise his kids here. So I have all the reason to make sure that this community gets his fair share, because I live here, my family lives here, my extended family, my entire family lineage lives here. So and when you have your own living here, you're bound to make better decisions, because the decisions that you're making is going to impact not only the other people that live here, but your own family. So that kind of speaks volumes as it is. And my only goal is to make sure our communities that have been left out for far too long get a voice. And I hope to be that voice. Thank you so much for the opportunity, brother.
Well, thank you for coming on. And I mean, once again, to our viewers, Japneet Singh, City Council candidate, and he's a busy campaigner. If you're living in that Queens Guyanese American community, you might see his flyer out on Liberty Avenue. You might see him campaigning himself. So best wishes to you on the campaign, and thank you once again for coming on tonight.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, man, and looking forward to all the great things you do too.
Thank you once again. I hope you have a good night. So for our Globespan audience, we have one more scheduled guest pending.
Our country for celebrating 55 years of independence. Om Vakratunda Mahakayam Suryakoti Samaprabham Nirviganam Kurume Devam Sarvakareshu Sarvara. Hari Om Shanti 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 Hari Om. Well, my humanitarian work, it's a lot to talk about, Mr. Ramgopal. And I know time is not adequate right now, but a little briefing of our country's, logo. When we are going to school, we say feeding, clothing, and housing the nation. Well, my humanitarian work and mission is including all of this: feeding, clothing, housing, and on top of that, educating the nation. Just recently, last month, I returned from Guyana. We opened up 5 computer learning center at 5 primary schools in Berbice. And one of my very good friend, Rudy from Florida, he sponsored 25 laptops and 5 projectors. So we installed them in these schools. And the Ministry of Education was there with us, Priya Manik Chand, Honorable Minister of Education, and Member of Parliament, Pandavikash Ramkisoon, the regional chairman, and it was a wonderful program. However, we are continuing, and in July I'll be going again to open another 7 computers learning center. Focusing on the kids' education is very important. We are living in the technological age, and the need there. It's sad to see that some rural area in Port Guyana, some of these kids never touch a computer or a keyboard. So they were very much excited about these computers that we installed. And there are some pictures I sent in, but I don't know if it's there. Nevertheless, we continue. We do a lot of charitable work. We assist when disasters strike, not only Guyana, but throughout the world. That is why our humanitarian work is called Global Humanitarian Foundation, a 3-day reminder in Jamaica, Queens. So I don't know how much time I have. Should I continue?
Well, yeah, you continue. I'm sorry that you are cut for time and that things went on so long earlier.
Well, our humanitarian work started quite over 20 years ago, since the tsunami hit, and started right here. We continue over across India, Pakistan, Gujarat, New Orleans, Haiti. We participated. We joined with BAPS International Charitable Foundation, and but we focus in mostly in Guyana presently, and Trinidad. Whenever they have the disaster there, we reach out to them and see what best we could do. And indeed, we cannot help or save everyone, but the little we have done makes a huge difference in many lives. We sponsor scholarship for the students, and a couple of years ago, one of them graduated from University of Guyana. And it was a very, very emotional moment, because this is a family that, not financially stable to send their daughter to Eugene, but we just, hop in there and take over the 4 years of tuition fees for her. And we are so proud of her that she has graduated, and now she pursuing further goals. So these are some of the humanitarian work we do. We do food hampers during the pandemic crisis, starting last year, and nonstop. We also distributed masks throughout the length and breadth of Guyana. And of course, all the member of parliament, they were all involved. They were the one on the field working for us. We were just supplying the items. Food hampers, feeding programs. We built a few houses for some residents there who are handicapped. One of them just last month we did the opening. We are pursuing another one right now as we speak, and another one after that one. So these are some of the highlights that we are doing in Guyana. And I left Guyana when I was 20 years. When Guyana gained independence, I was only 6. And going back to Guyana, I feel so proud to give back to my country that I have left as a little boy, and return on many occasions. And I will continue to do so as long as, sources permit. So these are some of the stuff we have done. And I thank you very much for having me. I know I fast forward a lot, but another time we will come back on and have a better program.
Well, I apologize for you having such limited time tonight.
Quite okay.
The show kept running on. We had the earlier panel went late, and then the candidate. But we thank you very much for your charitable work, and thank you for coming on tonight to talk about it. And I hope you have a happy Independence Day as well. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you, and you too, and your entire family, and thanks to Globespan for conducting this program.
Thank you. Thank you very much. To all our viewers, thank you for tuning in tonight. Thank you to our guests for coming on tonight. Thank you to candidate Bobby for coming on. Thank you to the candidate Japneet Singh, and thank you to our panel earlier, Timothy Jonas, former President Donald Ramotar, and former Member of Parliament Mr. McAllister. Thank you to our viewers for tuning in. Thanks to our guests, and hope you all have a happy Guyanese Independence Day, and hope you all have a good night. Take care.